Synopsis. After confirming that the Nightmare of the Millennium Puzzle wasn't actually a fever dream, Sugoroku checks in with his grandson to see if the puzzle has affected him somehow. Yugi remains as unhelpful as ever, so he's left to wonder just what it has in store for him. We then cut to a nearby correctional facility where a dangerous criminal breaks out by violently dispatching an officer, disguising himself as said officer, and commandeering a nearby police car. I'm sure that's all safe and fine and good though. The next day, Yugi and his new friends decide to go and hang out at the new Burger World restaurant after school, but Anzu suddenly shuts down that idea, claiming she's had several of her friends get sick after going there. She then immediately disappears with no explanation. The others start discussing how she's been acting strange lately when Jonuchi suggests that she's begun taking up prostitution in order to gain money. No, I'm not joking. No, I'm not joking!
まさかもしかしてアンズのやつ放課後援助交際とかやってんじゃねえだろうな
Jeepers crawlers, I know you two don't necessarily like each other, but that's no excuse for this completely baseless slut-shaming you're throwing out of nowhere. Of course, Yugi and Honda aren't having any of it, but Miho apparently got hit with the idiot stick between episodes and buys Jonuchi's story hook, line, and sinker, and starts tailing Anzu in order to protect her from the old men. However, the next day, Miho also starts acting strange, ditching her friends with Anzu as well. Jonuchi, of course, then adds Miho to his slut-shaming crusade, offering supposed proof of their infidelities by claiming he saw them purchasing an expensive lunch set from the school cafeteria. Yugi remains steadfast in his trust of his friends, but Honda begins to waver now that he has a personal stake in the matter, and he too starts to try following the girls in order to protect them. Unfortunately, this causes even Honda to start flaking on them, leaving early with the girls as well. You would think this would be the end of Jonuchi's prostitution theory, that is, if you completely forgot who Jonuchi was in the first place. Nope, he immediately calls Honda out as a man whore trying to get it on with a rich old lady. Remind me again, why is he supposed to be the good guy? Regardless, he and Yugi decides to follow the three of them themselves to get the full picture, where they find their way to the exact place Anzu tried to keep them away from at the start. Who would have guessed? It turns out that Anzu and the others had gotten part-time jobs at Burger World, which they had to keep secret since after-school activities are against school rules, and they knew that Jonuchi's big mouth would surely get them into trouble. Fortunately, before the situation can escalate any further, the manager shows up and seats Yugi and Jonuchi to their table to avoid further embarrassment. Anzu then serves them their burgers while threatening them not to say a word about her working there. She also decides to tell them the reason why she started working part-time, as she's saving up money to study dance in New York, another in a long list of tidbits we already know as longtime fans of the series. In stark contrast to the colossal asshat he's been up until this point, Jonuchi acts cool about the whole thing, offering to keep her secret and encouraging her to pursue her dreams without laughing at her. Seriously, he's been doing nothing but throw completely unnecessary and unfounded shade on just about everyone involved, even going as far as to say they deserved what they got when they outed them. And then all of a sudden he turns on a dime and becomes a decent human being out of nowhere? Who are you and what have you done to Jonuchi? However, we don't have time to dwell on that, as a detective then shows up and informs the staff, along with Yugi and Jonuchi who are being nosy busybodies, that he has been on the trail of Tetsu Tasaki, the escaped convict from earlier. We had seen him pop up periodically earlier, trying to rob several places, but he was thwarted every time due to the valuables already being gone. The detective informs the group that he's traced Tasaki to Burger World, but because he's a master of disguise, they can't tell where he is. Additionally, the detective suspects that he may be carrying a gun, so they can't interrogate the customers either without putting everyone in danger. Wait, firearms? In Yu-Gi-Oh? Oh, no, that's not how you're supposed to do it at all. You're supposed to just aggressively point in their general direction and that will provide you the intimidation you need. Well, future reality warping aside, after hearing that Tasaki may have a bruised leg due to an altercation with a guard from one of his heists, Anzu suggests that they use a nearby basket of toy cars as an excuse to check for said injury. They immediately scrap this, however, as the detective then comes out and tells the customers about the escaped convict and asks everyone to show their legs. Remind me again why you couldn't do this in the first place? Unfortunately, none of the customers have the alleged bruise, so the detective turns to another aspect that might help identify him. Apparently, Tasaki has a severe allergy to eggs, and since Anzu claims that the burger buns are made with eggs, he will surely show himself soon. This proves true, as one of the customers then starts acting strange and attempts to run away, but is caught and outed as Tasaki. Makes me wonder why they went with anything else in the first place if that was so frickin' easy. To add insult to injury, Anzu reveals she was bluffing about the buns having eggs, so Tasaki's symptoms were entirely power of suggestion. In a fit of rage, Tasaki tries to tackle Anzu, but only manages to get the manager, where he discovers the aforementioned bruise on his leg. He then tears off the manager's uniform, revealing a large spider tattoo on his back, revealing him to be Jiro the Jorogumo, another career criminal and master of disguise, much like Tasaki. He had apparently been disguising himself as Tasaki ever since the breakout, and had used him as a fall guy to rob the places he was about to rob and make off with the goods scot-free. Wait. Tasaki was never in the jail to begin with? How in Malakota's name do you get away with breaking out of jail by framing a guy who was never in there to begin with? Is the Domino City Police Department so incompetent that they can't even keep accurate records of the criminals they do catch? What dynamis hack wrote this into the script without checking if— Okay. I'm calm. With his cover blown, Jiro then takes Anzu hostage by taking Tasaki's gun and forcing the others to stand down unless they want her dead. He then blindfolds Anzu and takes her to a booth where he can enjoy himself before walking out the front door, just in case you had forgotten all of these characters are scum. He then orders Yugi to bring him a bottle of vodka and some cigarettes, but Anzu warns him to stay away. Jiro then slaps Anzu for speaking out, which angers Yugi enough to activate the puzzle, awakening the beast. Yami appears, then seats himself across from Jiro and challenges him to a shadow game, which Jiro, amused by his sudden chic and daring, accepts. The only rule of this game is that once it starts, neither of them are allowed to move any of their fingers aside from one of their choice. Whoever is left alive is the winner. And yes, the object of the game is to kill the other person. Yami says so explicitly.
どの指を選ぶかはお互いの自由。その選んだ指だけで行動する。
Jiro of course chooses his trigger finger, while Yami chooses his thumb. I suppose that could be useful to hitchhike to the nearest hospital, but he did say that the object was to kill, so he probably won't get that opportunity. The game starts and Jiro goes for the obvious move, while Yami counters with a lighter. What, to block the bullet? No, it turns out he's just offering to light Jiro's cigarette with it, which Jiro accepts. But then Yami drops the lighter perfectly on Jiro's other hand, pouring the vodka, which is now starting to overflow onto Jiro's lap. Now Jiro is trapped since he can no longer pull the trigger without the gun's recoil knocking the lighter onto the vodka, killing himself as well. This seems clever until you realize there's a few flaws with that plan. One, I'm no expert on lighter technology, but I'm pretty sure that they don't just stay lit when you let go of the trigger, because otherwise that would be a fairly dangerous design flaw. Two, there is no way in the Shadow Realm that Yami was able to hold on to, light, and then drop that lighter like that without moving his other fingers, which means he must have broken his own rules there. And three, what kind of bottle-flipping hacks god did Yami just invoke to land that lighter perfectly upright on the back of Jiro's hand at that awkward angle? How is that supposed to work?
That don't make no sense.
Well, anyway, then Yami grabs Anzu's arm, which he definitely couldn't do without moving his fingers, so he's absolutely cheating for sure, and Jiro is able to find a way out of his predicament.
こうすれば。
やはりルールを守ることができなかったようだな。闇のゲームは人間の本性を暴き出す。ルールを破った者には 運命の罰ゲーム。
Well, I guess that puts you at the top of your own list, you hypocrite. Well, anyway, he then afflicts Jiro with an illusion that causes him to believe flames explode out of his gun and swallow him alive as he cries for mercy. Supposedly, Jiro is then arrested, and Burger World is temporarily shut down, and Anzu is left wondering who her mysterious savior was since she could only hear his voice and it didn't sound like Yugi to her because it sounded too confident. A bit harsh, but from what we've seen of the kid, I suppose it makes perfect sense. Also, they all quit their jobs at Burger World. Why?
バイトばっかやってると遊戯に付き合ってる時間なくなっちゃうしさ。
Well, yeah, I guess that's true, but that didn't stop you from getting the job in the first place. Heck, that didn't stop Honda and Miho from immediately getting new jobs since Miho wants new stuff and Honda wants to give her new stuff. The incident wasn't their fault and the company certainly wouldn't fire them for it. Heck, since it was another employee who did it, you could also easily sue for... Oh... Thoughts? Man, what is it with these early episodes and ruining our nostalgia with stupid decisions? However, while the last one was a vital classic, this one is a bit more disposable. Anzu's backstory was a nice addition to the story, but it doesn't hold nearly as much weight as Jonichi's, since Anzu was relegated to the sidelines for the majority of the entire franchise. Almost every time she's had a prominent role, including this episode, she's inevitably turned into an object for the other characters to fight over like a prize to be won. This is especially frustrating in this episode because they took the time to establish Anzu as a legitimately strong female character with her own drive, ambition, and autonomy separate from Yugi and the others. And while she had a strong showing going for a while there, being able to do what even the police department couldn't, they immediately drop it once the real bad guy shows up, relegating her to her damsel in distress position. Speaking of which, let's talk about that plot point. The entire B story is incredibly disconnected from the main plot, which makes it a bit of a pointless addition to the story. Its inclusion brings the pacing of the overall plot to a grinding freaking halt because it interrupts the main story every time it shows up. It didn't even have any payoff since everything it set up ended up being a red herring that ended up being completely pointless once the real villain showed up. Additionally, both Tasaki and the detective proved more frustrating than it was worth because of the sheer incompetence of the two of them was starting to grate on me and rip me out of the immersion. The detective was utterly useless at his job, being able to be outclassed by a teenage girl who only managed to suss out the criminal because he was too stupid to realize that he wasn't actually allergic to the burgers he'd been eating for at least 2 previous times in the story. The rest of the story wasn't great either. Jonichi was even more of a spiteful jerk than usual. Yami was a huge hypocrite for calling out Jiro for cheating despite clearly being guilty of the exact same thing. And there really was no other reason for Anzu and the others to quit their perfectly good jobs at the end. However, the nostalgia for us longtime fans of the series was still strong enough to at least make it a tolerable episode. I'm giving it 5 stars for the nostalgia, but if it wasn't for that, it certainly would have been 3 or less. Trivia. Let's start with a list of characters that Toei decided to shove into this story. Tetsu Tasaki. Yup, the entire disconnected B-plot was entirely anime only. While he didn't end up impacting the story in any way, I do like that there was somewhat of a callback to the last episode as he shares the same last name as Ushio. While it's never been confirmed if they're related, if they are, it gives Ushio a lot more depth as a character as it not only explains his actions in the last episode, it helps give him some development for 5Ds where it's revealed that he became a police officer in contrast to Tasaki being a career criminal. It also gives his Goyo monsters a lot more thematic meaning behind them, but we'll get to that if and when I get to covering 5Ds. Similarly, as you might have expected, the detective was also added into this story. He's not actually an anime-only character though, as he does appear again in another episode later in the series, and he was in the manga version of that story. Obviously, I'll go more into detail in that episode, but I feel like his inclusion in this one only serves to cheapen his character even further as he was almost completely useless here. And while Jiro was not an anime-only character, his name is, as his manga incarnation was only referred to as the escaped prisoner. His appearance was also closer to Tasaki than Jiro, but it is very clearly Jiro who fills the escaped prisoner's role. Additionally, while Jiro had an identifying tattoo on his back, the escaped prisoner had one on his forehead of his prisoner number, which coincidentally was 777, resulting in the escaped prisoner having a luck complex, which ultimately led to his downfall. More on that later. Lastly, both Honda and Miho were added to the anime version of this story. While Honda was just trying to expedite his inclusion into the list of main characters, more on that in a future episode, Miho is actually a significantly more interesting case. Something that I wanted to bring up in the last episode but couldn't due to time constraints was that despite what you might think, Nosaka Miho is actually not an anime exclusive character. However, for all that she appeared in the manga, she may as well be. She only appeared in one chapter of the manga, but in that chapter she was almost entirely a background character, offering only 12 words of actual dialogue, including and Additionally, the only thing they kept of her original character was her being the object of Honda's affection, as her manga version was a shy and quiet student librarian as opposed to her outgoing and childish anime incarnation. Amusingly, the manga version of her actually rejected Honda outright, while anime Miho seems more than happy to string Honda along in the hopes of getting things from him, which is an interesting story choice to say the least. Finally, while the shadow game stayed the same as in the manga, the penalty game was different. While the anime version had Jiro drop the gun in order to remove the lighter from his hand, causing the shadow game to punish him for cheating while not punishing Yami for the same thing, the escaped prisoner never did this. Instead, he merely reminisces about how lucky he is and subsequently relaxes, believing that he'll be okay. But this relaxation causes his lit cigarette to fall into his lap, igniting the vodka anyway and setting him on fire for real, where he immediately burns to death. How's that for karma? This video is brought to you by my wonderful supporter on Patreon. He lowered his pledge so I can't shout him out by name anymore, but if you'd like to help me out and have your name listed here instead, the link is in description below. I'm still looking for participants for Quad D, so now is an excellent time to join. After that frustrating turn of events, Yami certainly isn't doing too well in my eyes, being outed as the cheater he really is. If only we can get someone who really knows how to screw the rules and show us what true cheating looks like. Next time on PTDevil's Yu-Gi-Oh! Journey, Clash, the strongest monster. Oh hey, an actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel in Yu-Gi-Oh! Who would have thought?